really dishonored the moment.
The next test of this divide, today's impeachment trial votes. Let's get straight up to Capitol Hill in CNN's Manu Raju. Raw tension last night, raw partisanship last night, and I suspect we're going to see a lot more of it today in the Senate.
Yeah, no question about it. The only question right now in the Senate is where do a handful of votes lie and will they break with their party's ranks? We just heard from Doug Jones, an Alabama Democratic senator, someone who had been closely watched given his difficult re-election race that he faces this fall in a red state. But he signaled just moments ago that he plans to vote to convict the president on both counts. Now, there are also questions about whether Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, where he will come down, that moderate Democrat saying that he's not going to make his decision known until he actually votes at 4 p.m. Eastern. Also, Kyrsten Sinema, who's an Arizona Democrat, won her election last year, has not said what she will do. And on the Republican side, the only question right now is what Mitt Romney will do, the Republican senator from Utah, someone who has criticized his president's conduct, someone who voted with Susan Collins of Maine to move forward on witnesses. Collins, of course, is voting to acquit the president, but Romney will deliver a floor speech this afternoon, knowing where he lies. But even after this vote, which will be mostly along party lines, if not straight party lines, the question will be what's next. Democrats in the House are signaling today that they are not done investigating this president. Jerry Nadler, the House Judiciary Committee chairman, told me earlier that he is likely, or the Democrats are likely, to subpoena John Bolton in the days ahead, which, of course, is something that they've been demanding happen. They asked the Senate to do that. The Senate stood in front of that process. The House Democrats initially opted not to do that, but a sign that they plan to move forward there. So even though today's vote will be a decisive one, the president will claim vindication. The Democrats in the House are signaling that they're not done looking into what they view as the president's misconduct in office. John.
Closing the impeachment chapter, maybe opening another investigative chapter. Manu Raju live on a very busy day on Capitol Hill. Appreciate it. I'll come back if there's more news in the hour. With me here in studio to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Vivian Salama, Olivier Knox with Sirius XM, Paul Kane with The Washington Post, and Lisa Lair with The New York Times. You were talking, as we were getting ready for the program, just about how unusual last night was. Today, there's going to be a historic moment. Presidents are not impeached very often. The trial doesn't make it to the Senate, even less often. And the atmosphere around it, which the impeachment thing has been partisan from the get-go, but last night was just wide open example of how this town is busted.
Yeah, and you had this incredible confluence of events, and it was Democrats out there in the chamber floor. You could just see their faces getting angrier and angrier, and also more fearful because the whole political environment, you've got a failed Iowa caucus, a completely muddled field right now out on the trail. They don't know who's going to hold the mantle for them in the election against Trump. And it was on fire. One of Speaker Pelosi's own guests, Fred Guttenberg, who lost a child in one of the mass shootings, he stood up and was yelling at Trump, and that doesn't even make the top 5 of the most interesting things that happened last night.
And in this climate, the Senate will have the conviction or acquittal votes today. Among the people we said we were going to watch closely are the senators who are on the ballot this year. Susan Collins of Maine is going to vote to acquit the president. We'll see how that one goes over back home. Cory Gardner of Colorado, Joni Ernst of Iowa, Martha McSally of Arizona. The Republicans are lining up with the president. Doug Jones, Alabama, ruby red Alabama. The Democratic senator who surprised us all by winning this election went to the floor today and says, I'm going to cast votes that might cost me my job.
His actions were more than simply inappropriate. They were an abuse of power. I believe that the president deliberately and unconstitutionally obstructed Congress by refusing to cooperate with the investigation in any way. I will vote to convict the president on both articles of impeachment. It is simply a matter of right and law.
Tries to make herself.
Doing right is not a courageous act. It is simply following your oath.
You could make the case Doug Jones was probably going to lose anyway. However, that's a bold move to at least not to say I'm going to vote with my people in Alabama, don't want to impeach the president, don't want to remove the president.
Well, look, I mean, Doug Jones won last time around. It was very tight. He had an opponent that was highly problematic, that was accused of sexual impropriety with multiple underage girls. So he got a lucky break last time around, but his coalition was built on the strength of black voters in that state. And black voters, particularly black women who really came out and organized for him, they want to see the president impeached. So he's in a tough spot. Alabama is a tough state for a Democrat to win. And, you know, he had to choose politically between his base and between, you know, potentially flipping some maybe swing voters who like the president. I'm not sure that latter category is particularly gettable for him. So I think in the end, he probably went with his conscience.
And we saw a lot of that playing out during the House portion of this as well, where a number of congressmen and women were from very vulnerable districts were very torn as far as which way to go. But for the most part, almost all of them went along party lines, voted along party lines. And so that's something we've seen in both portions. And that's something that the Republicans, especially the president's legal team, has been emphasizing, that this was just purely partisan and a hit job on the president.
And another, again, it's because of the election year we're in, it's hard sometimes to figure out where to turn your focus. The president of the United States was impeached. As Nancy Pelosi says, he is forever impeached. The Senate, just like it did in the Clinton days, appears likely today to acquit the president and to leave him in office, and this will become a conversation in the election year. The president wants to use it to his advantage, thinking he can gin up the base. Democrats say, you know, to your point about anti-Trump voters, they might feel disappointed that they didn't remove the president, so maybe that animates them to come out. If you're Republican Senator Susan Collins, running in Maine, a purple state, probably be blue in the presidential election. We'll see how it turns out. She says the president did wrong, but she will vote to acquit, and she says she believes he's learned a lesson.
I believe that the president has learned from this case.
What do you believe the president has learned?
The president has been impeached. That's a pretty big lesson. There has been criticism by both Republican and Democratic senators of his call. I believe that he will be much more cautious in the future.
Is there any reason in past history or recent reporting to suggest that's accurate?
No. What he's learned is he as long as he can keep his Republican senators together, he can do whatever he wants. That's the other lesson. I mean, I think it was Susan Collins who at one point earlier in his term said, okay, well now he's learned his lesson, so now he's going to change from what he was like in the campaign. And I think she's done this a couple different ways now.
Yeah. 3 hours after that interview aired on CBS, he was giving the Medal of Honor to Rush Limbaugh. It was not a constrained, restrained president.
And he was telling the TV anchors that, no, he hadn't learned anything because his call was perfect. I mean, we have sort of in real time rebuttals to what Senator Collins is saying publicly.
And then where do we go from here? Manu touched on this at the top. Again, you know, stay with us. Let's watch this vote play out today. But by all accounts, the president will be acquitted. The question is, do one or two Democrats vote to acquit him as well? And will the president then claim it is bipartisan? We'll watch as the vote plays out. You have some new reporting today, though. Manu Raju says the House Judiciary Committee might want John Bolton. They tried to get him, the Democrats did, as a Senate witness. He's about to write a book. It's going to come out. The transcript that has come out so far, some manuscripts of that book, pretty damning things about the president. Your reporting has even more new information. New information from emails that are out today underscores how the July 18th decision to hold the military aid stunned officials who had already assessed Ukraine deserved to receive it, and were preparing a Javelin missile order as well. The decision reverberated across the government for weeks. Officials grew so concerned over the deferrals by the Office of Management and Budget that they noted the aid was of serious risk and questioned if the move was legal under the Impoundment Control Act. So this is one of the things Democrats warned about in saying the Senate should slow things down, bring in these documents, bring in new witnesses. The email suggests that now President Trump will call it political, but that there's plenty of material for the Democrats to say, fine, we're going to keep looking.
And I think this is something that we're going to be talking about for weeks to come. One of the emails that we obtained was directly to Secretary Esper, the Defense Secretary, where it warned him that the president has a view of, quote, endemic corruption in Ukraine and wants to cease all aid to Ukraine. And that's a direct quote. The senior official at the Defense Department actually warned Secretary Esper that this would be a huge mistake if they go through with this. And so this was reverberating across the Department of Defense, especially for weeks leading up to the call with President Zelensky on July 25th. But also after that, that email to Secretary Esper was the same day as the call to President Zelensky. And so even as all this was going on, then the president was trying to kind of assure him that we have good relations with you, but please, go and investigate the Bidens. Still, Defense Department officials were panicking and believing that they could put a stop to this somehow. And
so the impeachment chapter ends today. but the story may continue. We shall see. And as we go to break, one of those senators we're watching, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, just watch how she responded to parts of the president's State of the Union address last night.
Thanks to Opportunity Zones, a plan spearheaded by Senator Tim Scott as part of our great Republican tax cuts. So long as I am president, I will always protect